This time had to come. In this, the opening statement, attention now passed to the judge. So I ask you this, Supreme Court of Justice, Judge, do you solemnly swear to Almighty God, Creator of heaven and earth, that you will stand by our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and its Canadian Constitution and use it to bring justice by its fairness, as apologies, reimbursements, reparations, fiduciary, and incivility, as peace is needed, as a payment of respect in the case of defending your home and protecting your family, that by your sworn duties, these provisions of honest evidence, not that made of fiction, are to be of true force and effect? Is that an agreement? Because I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Because truth is my sword, and karma is my shield. When love conquers all.
So, Judge, why I called this together to bring into question of my concerns over the regarding statements which I am about to address is that they are all tied in. And as I have promised you the whole truth and nothing but the truth, means giving you the full truth and nothing but the truth. It shows the tie-in of everything that needs to be addressed, because one thing supports another thing affects another, and another thing is overall tied in because of the same thing that's being addressed. Because, speaking as a couple, the both of us have never had our chance at fair trial or had our side really acknowledged, accepted, or understood. And now it's about time that we are given the chance to be able to defend ourselves. And I myself, standing up for myself and my partner, who momentarily cannot speak for herself, as I defend our home and family. So when I bring these issues I address today to you, my judge, my jury, to use the highest authority of kindness in respect to the application of the force and effect that will be applied, because as bad as the things I describe, they may seem so horrific that it would lead to an execution or life sentencing or just vaporization, ablation. Instead, as I said, we are not to become the demon by killing the demon and be as bad as the criminals that we are dealing with. So I request that you, Judge, please do the things that I cannot do myself as a person, but because you, my Judge, are going to be presented the things that I have proven to myself, and by revealing to you, I show you what it is exactly that I mean. As these things I present have proven to me to be very, very inconsistent with the provisions of our Constitution, Charter of Freedoms and Rights, inalienable rights of our universal Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, that we all here in this world are provided and deserve. Even the animals have rights. Because of the two major issues I find to be very concerning that I present here, because two major issues have factors that interplay between each other, making a causation of a duality of problem, which in this court we should be able to address. And if not all here will have two courts running with the same thing, because the whole truth includes it being all of the truth, not just talking about one little part here. But if we're going to start at any point, it would be the day that I've gotten the notice to relative that my sweet common law loving partner, Alice Jane Burton, had been detained at RCH. Right at that point, that means the doctors and nurses, they should have been talking to me. They should have been letting me know how it's going, because I've been quite concerned about her medication. Medication that they're forcing on her, non-consensual, as is involuntary, happens to be clozapine. Now, clozapine, if you haven't heard anything about clozapine, it's been banned in Europe since 1970. It killed way too many patients. And after all, if you remember anything about the Nuremberg Codex, I believe in Europe it's Nuremberger, but we know it as the Nuremberg Codex. And it clearly states that a patient is, or experiment, living human experiment, let's call it, because you never know what the outcome of these treatments are. That's what makes psychiatry always a experimental practice. And if the experimentalness of it has ever been removed, then the medicine itself still. And if you guys all know that these anticholinergics are murder, then still that would go against the Nuremberg Codex as well, because a patient is not to be harmed. And when we're talking about the use of anticholinergics, an anticholinergic happens to be an antipsychotic, or an antidepressant, or an anticonvulsant, an antidepressant, or an anti-Parkinson's, an antihistamine. There's plenty of opiates, it causes delirium, because when it causes hallucinations and the disorganized thinking, the things that you call schizophrenia, when it's actually medication induced, because it rips out your nervous system by cutting off the vitamin uptake, and that cuts off your immune system too, because the two are
tied in together through an endocrine system of our blood and hormone messengers. So when we're talking about the stage before enterocrites, then we're talking about our immune system, our lymphocytes and our neutrophils and such, the white blood cells that carry our sodium reactions with the calcium and sodium. Anticholinergics essentially cut off the uptake of our vitamin B. So what ends up happening is, if you ever heard of vitamin deficiency describing scurvy or anemia, well, essentially this is the reason why, okay? In the case of clozapine, which is an anticholinergic, it cuts off your vitamin uptake, causing a granulocytosis. That means a compromised immune system, which has been described to many as HIV/AIDS. Now, if these signs point to that the lymphopenia that leads to cancer because of the stopping of an immune system, meaning a compromised immune system, that the only way that people get cancer is that they already are experiencing HIV/AIDS because it's a compromised immune system after all, then we are taking a look at the practice of these anticholinergics a little bit more seriously, I hope. If they were only designed to create an industry, then that means that the greater public has been enslaved to death. And that would outline problems dating all the way back to the war and that Nuremberg trial. We get the Nuremberg Codex, and where patients are not to be harmed. And that is a fact. And when it comes to involuntary, didn't Abraham Lincoln already free the slaves? Didn't we already have a British end slavery in 1833? Didn't we just have a Supply Chains Act put in place in 2024? So involuntary, that means to anyone, it means slavery. And as I just described what euthanasia is, especially when all of the cancer service, cancer foundations, all of that, all of the AIDS foundations, all that money-grubbing foundations that take charity money and all that away from the people that need it to live or to be able to survive in this world. There are people dying on the street, and the streets are definitely a death sentence. As I pointed out, that when we talk about anticholinergics, that includes opiates and opioids. So why would anyone force an opiate addiction on someone involuntary, especially so non-consensual? We only define non-consensual and rape to be tied in, because that's exactly how you define what rape is. And when we're talking about involuntary, being just what nobody wants. If anybody wanted it, it'd be voluntary to them, and it wouldn't be involuntary anymore. So involuntary sticks to as being just that nobody wants. That would mean that it goes against every single provision of our constitutional rights and amendments in the United States and our Canadian Constitution in our Canadian Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, which are the laws that preside over all other laws all across this land and all across the world when we look at the Universal Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms and our inalienable rights. So what is needed, more than anything, is the need for change is evident, so change is what is needed when it comes to how we have our system designed. Because for one thing, psychology happens to be purely educational, and to learn psychology teaches you just that, nothing medical about it. However, medical itself, when you see that they're just creating their own industry, like a bunch of Munchausen syndrome by proxies. And that term is a psychological term for a psychiatrist who injures their client. So the client has to turn to them for treatment, which in this case, the anticholinergic, just causes more problems, okay? And that's pretty much enslavement, especially when you're applying involuntary aspect to it, which is what nobody wants, So just see it for what it is, okay? See it for what it is. Ask anyone from Africa, are you down with doing a little involuntary until you die? They would probably freak out, okay? Because that means some reparations are in order, okay? Like, I'm serious. Like, freeing the slaves, the abolition of the slavery that's taking place as involuntary patients go. And what we are going to have to do about these off-the-charts records about how many murders have taken place when we see AIDS is having over 100 million deaths and cancer, which, again, compromised immune system described by the anticholinergic treatments, is around 10 million a year. Now, if we're looking at global numbers, okay, global numbers, this affects a great population of our global numbers, seeing as there's 8 billion people in the world. And when we're talking about hundreds of millions of people, that's a good chunk of the entire world. Now, I'm not saying to do away with medical practice or medical knowledge. No, have it a part of our basic education and to learn it right, to learn it correctly. That way we can, protect our families. We can treat our own wounds. And, if we need to get x-rays done, I'm sure that there will be clinics available. However, x-rays themselves, that does a lot of damage as well to the person. That's what's with the lead, coverings because of sterilization, which you get informed of, but it's not like you have any choice in that once you're in the room, but, smile. So anyway, try and make the best of what we got, and hopefully we get this resolved, because obviously this type of enslavement and murder, it cannot continue, it cannot take place, and it dates all the way back to, the Nuremberg War, Second World War, as you know, around here, the war that followed the Great War, because essentially Germany had no money for any military. They were totally bankrupt. Their money meant nothing. It still is nothing. When we look at a 1910 Deutschmark, 1,000 Deutschmarks would be a year's wage over there back then. And now, even still to this day, even though it's over 100 years old, it should be at least considered old money. It's only worth like $1.90 or something on eBay. It's absolutely nothing. Now, because they had no money, as soon as Dr. Warburg had published his Hallmarks of Cancer, of how to cultivate your neoplasm in another person by these methods, which was a sales pitch of how to get their economy going, and in the face of their war with their manipulation and enslavement, they had been, well, winning invisibly, because we still have the doctrine of how our medical should work. Like we are supposed to have a hospital system to help people, but do we need a hospital system at all is a question, especially when we're talking usually you only go to a hospital if you have injury, and if it's just mainly the cancer and the AIDS and these type of issues like of disease that's caused by anticholinergic, like neurological diseases like Parkinson's and such, like epilepsy, it's really horrific. That's why it has to end now, because after all, an anticholinergic is what we consider a drug, and that's supposed to be banned and illegal, whereas medicine actually derives from our vitamins, and that means all the performance enhancing vitamin like their metabolites that through our metabolic system. This is how we attain these type of medicines, and a healthy diet is really what's needed. If you remember the 4 healthy food groups that we were talking about a long time ago, well, that is the type of health that we need. We need that more than anything. We need the wholesome, honest truth, and the whole truth. Like, you gotta understand what I'm talking about, because I myself, I understand medical science perfectly, as well as I understand psychology very well indeed, because I didn't happen to read the Douglas College curriculum that my mother had when she was taking the courses, and I skimmed through the book as quickly as I could. I was really more interested in learning something that was interesting, and well, it seems to help, and I suggest it for everyone. Like a part of our education system, have a reform system of our education system where we don't need imprisonments either, any form of imprisonment, because essentially, why do you get punished? So you learn something, isn't it? You want them to learn something, because if they learn the wrong things, obviously, like they go squirrely and get right into all these different aspects of criminality, because now they think that's all they are, and they can't get a job, and they're just doing that, but they're getting released in the couple. So then they're released out onto the public and doing all this type of stuff. Where if we were to teach them the golden rule, we're to teach them a bit about religion, because religion essentially relays on perfectionism and the golden rule in any culture, because we all speak different languages. The story came out a little bit differently for all of us, but we still have that core where we gotta love thy neighbors, we love thyself. It means like an eye for an eye. It means it means balance. Like a yin and the yang. So because cause and effect. That's basically the structure of karma when we look at the law of averages. That's maybe a red card will go, but that means because red card already happened, black card's gonna happen. Right? So that's how we gotta see it, and by understanding this type of stuff. Now, we have to sort it out, because through an education system. Now, if we're talking about a residential education system where the money from all of the medical goes into our education system instead, where we also have housing for all of the poor people who get an education and can learn hands-on, you pay for that hands-on time as a trainee would. Like a trainee, they're getting their education hands-on right then and there. So if we're to take a look at what's already in the associations of our communities, then we already see a structure that has kind of forged itself. Time and time again, this is how it's done. It shows you how it's supposed to be unveiled. But when, say, within a working system, we find these cogs to be maintained, especially when pointing out maintenance workers don't have much time doing maintenance work. They essentially wait around, like they fix something that's good for a couple of years. That became a problem at our residence here. Now, when talking about the pest control, providing the pests, like by a video that I caught them placing mice in the apartment through the underneath the water heater crawl space area, which now it's been filled in with that foam, so I don't believe they're going to be doing that anymore. But so it relates to people creating their own industry, and problem is, because that's a kind of criminal thing, we got to address it, okay? Because I want my Alice to come home to a safe place where we're not being harassed by the people that stole our items. And this is what we have to get back, because when I got my notice to relative that Alice is being held as involuntary, I myself got pulled into involuntary when I got denied my visitation rights. I asked them to check my foot, because at home my feet were being torched from underneath. Now, thing is, people may not imagine this happening, but yeah, they injured me with heat guns from just below in the crawl space and made videos showing it. And I did have a physician after a month and a half of serving involuntary who had checked my feet. And as soon as I got my feet checked, then I was released within a week after they had cream-plied and bandaged. I began getting calls and communication from the residential tenancy home of BC Housing, where Alice and I live now. Thing is, they wanted in to get a mattress, take my bed, because it had bed bugs, and they couldn't get in. They thought I changed locks, but the tip of my key broke off in the lock, and only my key would open the door. So I was to come home within that week, and they really needed in, so they got locks in, and they let themselves in on premise to get that. However, by the video that shows Alice's parents, who had been let into the apartment before, they had claimed that they were looking for her passport because she's no longer a tenant. This means that her parents trashed the apartment looking for his passport, because in the video they provided shows an overturned chair in the bedroom and a mattress. The bed's still there. They were there first, and they trashed the place. It was staged. It was like they were covering the surface area. There wasn't much coverage. It was all personal items was the main problem, and those personal items were of value, but it was staged. It was staged to look like it, but they continued to smash the
smash the items, because in the video you see Alice's dad actually flip something like a stack of picture frames or plates or even a glass table lid, just big smash. And that's right in the video. And in that video it does show one of the cameras as well on the table with film equipment and stuff like camera cases, which again, all of those items were taken, and I can provide pictures of things, some like the music equipment, including a $6,000 Gretsch White Falcon, which was kind of cream colored actually, but beautiful guitar and unique. Close to $6,000 on that item alone means grand theft over 5,000, which is pretty bad. When we're talking about personal items, we're also talking about sentimental items. Sentimental items that have great value, but as well, we did have items that had great value, like our MacBook Pro Max that I bought from the Apple Store online. So it didn't have a printed receipt from the company, but did have a Visa statement that shows the purchase. So, and it says Apple on it, so unmistakable. There was a couple other purchases that was related to it that brought the price from $9,300 and then another $400 tacked on. So that's why I say close to about $10,000 just for that alone. But personal items, like if I'm going to list everything right now, I suppose we could get into that. I want to tell you kind of the span of everything, and then we can kind of get back into details afterwards, after you hear what happened. Because when our stuff was all taken, and this includes jewelry, like jewels and coins and stuff, that's, again, like the Prince Charles and Diana wedding, 1981, and the silver jubilee, silver dollar, because that's like an ounce of silver, but it's like commemorative. Little details like that, naming everything would take quite a long time, considering that, there are items that are irreplaceable. But along with the items are last year's tax forms that had like our SIN numbers, and so identity theft, our bank information, our Visa savings, that all have the codes on the bills and stuff. All of our paperwork was taken, for the most part, all of it, but there was a little bit left. Our receipts for the cameras were included in some of the stuff that was taken. So you see, there was a lot of stuff that didn't need to get removed, because by the time I got home, the place looked like it was gutted. And after a couple of days, some more things kept on disappearing, and it wasn't very good, like some gym bags and whatnot, designer ones that's gone, saved up for Alice and I, because she deserves good things because of what type of experience that she's had in the past. If she ever got a chance to explain it, she told me on camera before. I recorded it because I knew there would come a day. that this all had to be described and explained. So speaking for her and speaking for us both, because she got threatened with eviction if she didn't sign an N10C agreement. And they came straight to the hospital in RCH, which is from Vancouver through Burnaby, and then you reach New Westminster, but you keep going, it's almost at Coquitlam. So that much of a distance. They came over, and they hadn't made entry yet, because that's the thing about Alice's dad and Frank Warren Burton showing up like before the mattress was removed, meaning that their method of getting us pay for the locksmith, because they needed in to get the bed that they promised they were going to replace, which was the reason why I kind of went along with it. But the thing is, my key would have opened the door just fine if they waited for me to come home like within that week. But it seemed like a big rush, like they had to scam everything they could before I got home. It's like they didn't know that I wasn't here until they tried making some type of entry. Now, if the entry was originally, because Alice's parents wanted in, when we got this apartment, we were escaping horrible parental abuse, and it was our refuge, and we were promised that they would not be allowed to come around or in our apartment, especially when we weren't there. And this is exactly what happened. For them to be such a level of parental abuse that they had somehow colluded or paid off or promised that the staff here, that they could have our stuff, or if they took it, we don't know, but the UC Housing was involved with letting them in, which they shouldn't have. And Igor promised us. So when Igor stopped working here and Michael Hohed came in, things got a little bit worse, because it seemed like that's when we began experiencing the foot torturing, and we were experiencing the feeling of something liquid pouring on our heads. So looked into it and found out online it meant permeable liquids. Now, I'm not saying it was formaldehyde, but that is an example of a permeable liquid. What is permeability? It means it can pass through solid objects, like, say, gas and whatnot, or high pressure, whatever. If you're to spray, say, dry ice blast, which they use in hazmat, up against wall, you're going to feel it on the other side. That's a fact. If you are, say, welding or anything like that, this would be directed heat, Now, to put it into a comparison of where they would have learned these methods, if someone told you that there was some show where it explained all of this, where they had a heat coil underneath the Bible
so when the person put their hand on to swear to the Bible, it would, sizzle or cook, and they would, be getting afraid if they were guilty. And they also have heat coils and like heat guns underneath the person's feet that they controlled when and how much heat to apply to get the type of reaction they wanted. Now, if that is what takes place inside a courtroom where these things are learned, then we really have to see the seriousness of the situation. Because, for one thing, lasers have been around for many, many, many years, but the prohibited ones are above 20 joules. 20 joules would cause an injury with a heat laser, for instance, because if people are bringing those into courtrooms and kind of irritating people by hitting them with it, occasionally making someone itch their nose or that raises their ear. This is some type of control, like an MK Ultra situation, which this really shouldn't take place. And to make you aware of it, that some of the criminals that this has been practiced on have learned how to do this type of thing and have gone full out on it. Because I myself, I'm covered in injuries that I've been trying to sterilize and heal using methods of just good health, like taking a bunch of salts and drinking a bunch of milk. So you have that sodium calcium reaction that is all about our immune system. So anyway, as I described, if you would only think what type of show was that, as I said, videos described as well. So I'll include all of that type of thing. So but yeah, I sustained injuries. The physician at the hospital described it as lacerations, which went, neglected, medical neglect, which that's a law term for deserves to be sued, and that's what we're here for. There's a lot of medical injuries taking place. In fact, when we take a look at what happened to my best friend Goran, he actually was complaining about it being too high dose for them to lower it, and they jacked it up, and now he's dead. And that was right before the pandemic, and right after I'd won a review panel then. But I won a review panel that I filed in February, right after getting out of the hospital, and I'd won that because the doctor was caught lying about the medication, lying about the effects of it, lying about that in front of the panel of judges who knew better and knew that something was definitely not right. And I did have an opportunity to go tugboat chefing, but the problem is that tugboat, it didn't work. It got sabotaged, is what we're told. That someone put a bunch of sugar in the gas tank. He had to get new well, I'm not a mechanic. Cylinders, big cylinders. That's a new engine, basically. The whole thing is seized up. So when he said that it would be ready, and I already had these court cases in place, so I wasn't able to go out for the work that I was hoping to get this year. But speaking of losing money on work, the business tools, the laptop and the cameras and such, because those were my business tools, I was unable to work for that entire time, meaning that the opportunities that I missed from being able to event document like weddings and such, or event document at shows, music shows, theater shows, wherever permitted, live festivals and such. That was what I was doing before the pandemic, and having to learn so much just to try and save Alice, because she's number one in my world, and I love her, and it's been a total nightmare. Considering that as soon as I began asking about what happened to the stuff, there was a investigation, a BC housing investigation, where I was supposed to hear back from. But as soon as I started asking about that and requested that my toilet get unplugged, then I started experiencing problems with BC housing. Now, see, in March we had requested that BC housing inform the hospital that she was not evicted, that she could return. But then the hospital didn't really have an email for that to receive. So we're hoping that we could get it ourselves to give to him, because we could print it off or whatever, make it a physical copy. But Michael Hogue refused to give any information like that. He was very secretive about everything. It seemed very strange. Didn't know what to think about that at that point. But when I began asking more about the investigation later on, all of a sudden, this new, maybe he isn't new, but I have never seen him before. They called him Merritt, but someone tried telling me it was Mike Savick, but I thought Mike Savick was the little bald guy that wears camouflage and talks about hunting all the time. Anyway, whoever the building manager actually is at this place, they should probably make it more public and more accessible to be in contact with them, because they don't seem very communicative. Because when I thought I was going to get my toilet fixed in August, and the guy Merritt shows up, and he seemed pretty mad. Like he'd seen the toilet, and he just, I wanted him to fix it. He began complaining about it, and he wrote in his report something about there being animal poo on it when the toilet was just full. There was no poo on it, on top of the toilet. So, and I don't have any pets, so it just kind of points out what type of childish imagery this guy hallucinates to get out of doing something for the people who are paying rent here that he's actually supposed to be working for and not against. But anyway, he began doing a second yearly inspection report, and these inspection reports are usually done yearly. That's what makes them annually. So when he began doing that, I thought it very strange, but he began writing horrible reviews, saying the walls were from 1 to 4, a 4, in other words, completely destroyed, because this happened to have been a damage report. And he tried describing the stove as being, again, completely destroyed, needed so much maintenance and repair that it might as well be replaced, and trying to get me to pay for it in the following letter. That before that letter, had gotten a letter that wanted to raise the rent. The rent raisal had come in right on the 13th of August, and it's wanted to go from up to now 453. I'm not sure what I'm paying right now, but I thought it was in 300s, and that's well over the percentage that's allowed of a 3% increase. So this is what I mean. It followed the second yearly report, which on this yearly report it says that I have a kitchen fan, and I got a 2. So the kitchen fan was damaged. However, on the first report it clearly says NA. There is no kitchen fan, and you can clearly see there's no kitchen fan. There's not even a fan in the bathroom. Thank you. There is no fan here. But like I said, weaponized delirium. He hallucinated a fan in the kitchen that happened to be so damaged that it required 2. So, noticeable. When we're talking about sink counter traps in the kitchen, 2, okay. Cupboards, drawers in the kitchen, a 3. That's pretty damaged. That's like saying that's a Rottweiler chewed on it. It still opens and closes, but you know what I mean? Or maybe a door's broken off, or it doesn't, well, anyway, it describes fire damage, basically, all of this, especially when the common items, meaning the living room, the paint gets a 4, which would relate to absolute vandalism, like spray painting, and, how else could, of a 1 to 4, you got a 4 on the paint. The flooring, a 4, again, describes it being gouged out and, it damaged. This is a damage report, after all. Doors, closet, 3, fixtures, outlets, 3, where he was giving me a hard time about the Telus outlets, that the Telus guy had left a little crook open because he was going to have my cable fixed, and it took a while for the cable to get completely sorted out, but now I have that. I don't believe I've watched any television at all, but it's good to have cable. And here it also says smoke detector a 2. That means it's been damaged, and the heat and hot water a 2. Is he saying something about the entire building in itself? Like there's a problem with the heat and hot water? Okay, well, this is what I mean. The cupboards are fine, and I could clearly show in videos, no problem. Disprove everything on that paper so bad. But the thing is, though, when I had tried addressing my concerns, that if that damage report was to stay affixed to my rental housing record, that I'd never see the day that I ever got to live in a roofed situation where I had, in other words, be homeless for the rest of my life, because I wouldn't be able to rent anywhere if that type of garbage was believed by anyone. And believe me, if I don't clear this and make this obvious, that this was an attempt at my life. Considering that when I had addressed my concerns, I get a final warning letter, and it's that's the threat. That's an actual written threat that you can clearly see, because and there's no previous warnings either. That's the thing. When saying that personal items, food scraps that scattered all throughout the unit's floor was complete and total garbage, because there was no food scraps. He would have said what type of food it was, but he didn't take any photographs either. Debris and animal waste found splattered all over toilet and flooring. Then that again, a horrific lie, just weaponized delirium, a hallucination that he made up because the kitchen and sink area full of cigarette butts, dirty containers and brine. Well, to describe that properly, yes, there was an ashtray that was in there, and I placed in it. It wasn't doing anything wrong. The place, it was a little bit grimy, but I just have to wash these containers, he says, which are the dishes themselves. So look at the criticality of it. Okay, I'm getting threats over this, and he's saying the rental unit overall is extremely unsanitary and Mr. Fowler, well, that's coming from the toilet that I asked him to unplug, and he had ignored that for a month. And whenever I came back to ask again about it, or address these hate mail letters of threats, then I get told that I'm the one who's threatening. If I point out simple facts like, you're a crook, you should go to jail, you're probably gonna get deported, you tell them, right? And I think deportation would actually be one of the best things for someone who comes to this country and doesn't play right, because all their friends and family and all that stuff, that's back home where they came from. And if they do that type of stuff there, maybe that's why they don't want to go back, is they burned every bridge and pissed off all the people. So you gotta look at it that way. It's, how could home be unwelcoming? So if they're doing this type of thing here, so something that we're going to have to address, obviously, because when we're talking about some type of punishment, where we are trying to avoid the whole punishing thing, there's always, Antarctica, box factory. for anyone who's, being totally facing the golden rule, after all, like threatening eviction and all that type of stuff, and deportation being pretty much the same thing, but deportation being there's a home to go back to, home where you came from, but and the eviction note of it, that's the same as any banishment to Antarctica, I suppose, especially in the winters here in Canada, where if you're sleeping on a sidewalk in a big ice puddle, like you're not going to live all that long. You have to admit, Now, that's kind of the thing that they had planned for me by telling their lies to cover for the stuff they stole. And they continued sending me threatening letters of hate mail, where, in fact, one of them completely amazed me. It actually said on it, violence means the attempted or actual exercise by a person other than a worker, meaning that, they're kind of excluding the worker from, and includes any threatening statement or behavior which gives the worker reasonable cause to believe he or she is at risk of injury. Well, what about the person? They didn't include the person there, because if they're saying that violence and threats are disallowed except other than the worker, the worker's allowed to do it, because what we see here is a whole bunch of hate mail and threats, especially when it's revolving around pointing out how to describe someone as, when they're being like arrogant and like cocky, smug, and being just some type of a little gangster, and then looking at a BC housing where they seem to be backing each other up, but maybe if they seen what was going on, they wouldn't want to be a part of it. I don't know these people personally, but we're going to have to take all of them aside and find out exactly what psychology remains in their thinking minds, because to be aware of what you are doing and what you're saying and how violent a description of the damage report was, because it was basically describing a total renovation like fire damage. And the worst part is when the date wasn't filled out right, it said 08/blank/2024, meaning that was that day, month, year, like that kind of seems subsequent. Leaving out the month would only say that they're planning to fill it in at another time, because after all, when we are looking at a damage report, it's ugly. And that they would not admit to what their motives were, especially when it was brought on when I was asking about the BC housing investigation. And this had to do with how Alice got put in the psych ward, because her parents, as soon as we began looking into having her ring appraised, because we seen something online that it was a Renaissance ring. It was like $85,000. So, we better find out how much this is worth, because it seems to be one of the oldest, rarest things. It could be made of gold. But since then, I've noticed that I was actually able to find one that looked identical to, but it makes me wonder if that's actually the ring itself. And I would like to look into reclaiming it because of the sentimental value behind it. But in order to do that, we might have to get some type of fiduciary to be able to cover the costs and make the replacements if they are given back. If they were only put into some type of holding where they were holding on to it, waiting for the statute of limitations to run out and then unload it, well, guess what? If they still have all our stuff, we'd greatly appreciate it back, and that would show some respect. And after all, because Alice herself was not evicted, she should be allowed to come home, to return home. As Michael Hoga had told me personally over the phone, that sure, if she could get out of the hospital, it's almost insinuating like she's never getting out of the hospital. I mean, what do you think that he has been telling the hospital about her? That he's just fictionalizing, hallucinating, he's delirium, that he's weaponizing, That's kind of the problem, because he's telling me that, oh yeah, she can come back, she gets out of the hospital, and then he goes and tells the hospital that she's not allowed back. Going around saying one thing to one person and then saying something else to another. That proves total antitrust. Because essentially, we have an enemy within working against the tenants here, being completely inconsistent with provisions of being helpful. I mean, what are they being paid just to ruin lives? I mean, what type of job is that? Is that seriously the job details? Anyway, as I said, Alice has to return home to me, because we have been in a romantic relationship for almost a decade, and we are in midlife in our prime. And for someone who's about 40 years old, a decade is a quarter of our lives. That's we've been together. And you gotta remember, that's a quarter of life would be until the age of 10, which we don't even remember all that much of, but from 10 to 20 seems like a lifetime. And the 10 years, that's almost 10 years, 8 years, but still, if you're to count 1 to 9, that would be about the amount. However, yes, we have to count with zero first, because that's the sequence of its placement. Blank being nothing, after all. But we have a future to look forward to, and a family to grow together. She's the only family I have, and I won't be social without her, because I will not start a new life apart from her, because she is my spouse. And what's sicko? Human trafficker to involuntary servitude, slavery, as an involuntary patient. Living human experimentation is a Nuremberg Codex violation because involuntary is non-consensual, and non-consensual is how we define rape. And it does happen to be a sexual act to a sexual sadistic personality disorder who gets pleasure out of inconveniencing, deception, misdirection, perjury, and spiteful, deliberate frame-up, blaming for the crime you just got victimized by. So you get victimized again by them, like you got threatened. And then you get threatened by someone claiming that you threatened them, or one of their gang members, and because they threatened you for threatening, you comment or question the turntables by proxy abuse of weaponized delirium from abusive personality disorders who hallucinate things about you that anyone who knew you would say that is not a correct description and is very inconsistent with one's character. Being of the involuntary, being non-consensual, and non-consensual is the very meaning of rape, as it is not wanted. Or if it was wanted, it would be lovemaking. A rape is being attacked sexually, and when a sexual sadistic personality disorder is getting off and having their jollies, it's a sexual rape, as in penetration by penis or penetration by syringe insertion. And the release of the anticholinergic drugs that essentially completely demobilize a person. And because it takes out your nervous system while it's choking out your immune system, because that's what happens in your bones, okay? When your lymphocytes and your neutrophils and your macrophages and the myeloid cell, stem cell progression from that stage to the stage of the erythrocytes, which the erythrocytes are the red blood cells that they oxygenate, and then carbon. 6-mediated 1-carbon metabolism in the respiratory system occurs with the carbonation, and our genetics get encoded that way as the stem cell progression, the myeloid, it brings itself to a paladin, which essentially heals. You see? When we're talking about our nervous system being that of calcium and sodium reactions, then we see how POTUS works with the yogurt, salt, bread, a combo, which, the yeast actually is like neosporin, if you knew that, okay? But essentially it activates the immune system directly by these calcium and sodium reactions. And this is why a POTUS is a very, very legendary thing. That president of the United States is called a POTUS because he should have that type of knowledge as well. Then he should be the one who knows it. And I happen to know it, but I'm a princeps senatus, so since millennium empowered. Since 2001, millennium empowered means sentenced to 1,000 years on my family's convictions of life everlasting and heaven on earth was seen as a claim of immortality. So, I have a duty to live by the golden rule. And obviously, when someone makes love, babies are made. It's the act of life creation. When someone makes hate, death occurs. And it's a sexual action of hate making when someone murders someone, but still these murders are sexual in their cruel nature. And when I've been witnessing my spouse get raped, socially restricted, in prison, isolated, in a hospital hostage by a terrorist organization that act like overpaid, egotistical lunatics who like pushing people around, telling them what to do, cracking the whip, shackles and chains, oppressed like all-powerful slave driver Pharaoh of the Golden Nile, all bound to lord shit for brains, dominator of the submissive by feeding off fear pheromones like a predatory, horny, loaded gun, sadist, role-playing caregiver in a disinformation because of the fake person who smiles while they hate has a hidden agenda because they have Munchausen syndrome by proxy and are antisocial personality disorder, sexual, sadistic, sociopath, narcissistic, psychopaths, criminally insane, pathological, compulsive liars. And seeing how personality disorders who think they are more important than God's love because they are overpaid and the money for nothing went straight to their heads. Because BC Housing's provisions violated the charter and calling it Section 52 against this rogue agency, I follow the calling a Crown Proceedings Act process with a landslide of evidence pertaining to an underground criminal system pulling strings to manipulate the vulnerable into thinking that being held responsible was to be blamed, when to be responsible is merely having an ability to respond. And who is held accountable, they make you think, is to blame. But to be accountable only pertains to having an ability to count, because I want you to tell me how many X's there are in this count. X is 0, X is 1, X is 2, X is 3, X is 4. I just counted how many X's, but how many X's did you count? I counted them out loud as 4. X, 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 4. Because blank is how we define nothing. 0 is a beginning digit in our numerical unit of consecutive numbers sequence of counting. X is 0, X is 1, X is 2. How many X's? Because I just counted it off to you. Why would you say otherwise? And alert 3 in your telepathy of spell of mind meld hawk predictability. 3 would be X0, x1, x2, x3. 3 is x, 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 x. As I am correct, please and thank you, case 1, because of my ability to respond, with an ability to count makes me responsible enough for you to count on, especially if I'm in check with our freedoms and rights as the laws that govern all other laws, from a wisdom that built the Bet Hamikdash that stood for thousands of years up until the erection of the Great Pyramids of Egypt when Moses parted the Red Sea. Because we never had a full 24-hour day in the history of mankind, seeing as we must start with 0 hour, and that initial 0 hour must complete itself before the 1 hour begins, and the 24th hour must complete itself as in 24 59 minutes, before the next day can start with the beginning of the 0 hour. Proper counting is essential to avoid a linear bell curve and the loss of numbers that cause inflation of currency, because 1 to 10 is less than 10 to 20 because of the loss of numerical sequence. When we see 0 reoccurrence in 10 as it follows 9, 0 cannot be nothing when it's the beginning placement in sequence of consecutive full unit of measurement amalgamations of ascending final equation, gross total placement of value of collective sequential whole unit total volume of its placement amount. Intellectual see the obvious, so please have mercy on me and believe me when I say that I do very much believe that what tragic disfigurement this has been to grasp on civility, to be very concerned matter that I am addressing, especially with such deviant atrocities connived with such malicious intent as the highest recorded deaths by statistics of 1,000% higher than average, meant 10 times more than any other apartment building standing untouched by war or natural disaster. Awards handed out for the highest mortality rate goes to BC Housing Management, the terrorist organization who organized the Grim Reapers of grandparents by the every week book solid doing bed bugs stay out of the apartment 24 hours after their poison blasts and killing the Ubermensch surface dweller that is actively in use from below in the maintenance crawl space as a reminder of the catacomb terrors of the 1930s and 1940s in Europe that used to blowtorch the ceilings of the catacombs, which were heating up the sidewalks that people walked, injuring their feet. This is now still continuing with our underground railroad system of our city maintenance network. City maintenance tunnels, for one, are an escape artist's dream come true. And when seeing the maintenance crawl spaces and inside of buildings, that's the coinciding, especially when this building itself was listed as having 12 stories. But the elevator only shows basement and floor 9. However, we have some lookout tower up top, which I've seen some very odd activity going on up there, especially in regards to what exactly would be taking place up there. And when I stuck my head up there one time, I got snapped at by a real moody, pushy, secretive weirdo, okay? Like I said, personality disorder. Like, anyone who's that antisocial and cruel and, if they got something to hide, they're going to be acting like this. Because someone who's got, if they had like a tomato farm up there, like they'd, oh, come, have a tomato. You imagine them as an old Italian man, but this is a Chinese retirement home. So we have a lot of exocrine system pheromone communication, because essentially how we emote ourselves shows our character. And no matter what you say in Chinese, what is understood is how you say it. Because a lot of times when we are being literal in English, that we allude to something else. Like if we were to say, say that responsibility and accountability was blame, even though we know it as just abilities. Because if we were to divide that word into different pieces, now we see it as it is. Because after all, a traffic holdup, that means that things are held up. But if something is upheld, they say that it's something that's loved or something, celebrated, but to uphold the law, actually, it means to obstruct the law, to tell you the truth, just like if you're upholding traffic, you're obstructing traffic. So we're talking about misinterpretations and disinformation, especially when we already know what's what, because essentially when I'm talking about my mother, who's extremely abusive, wouldn't ever give me the credit that I know what I'm talking about, because essentially the whole issue that I recently dealt with her would be the issue that she refuses to acknowledge these fact-checkable things that I've learned and tried passing on that information to her for her own health and her own well-being and her own understanding. But still, she's all about the human trafficking and murder, attempted murder, because it seems like Munchausen syndrome by proxy is it's almost like she lost her soul. Like she's void of intelligence and void of compassion, and that essentially is a scary person, especially when she was a nightmare of abuse for many years. And this means that Alice is my only family, and especially when witnessing the type of abuses that taking place before us to have to try and get sanctuary here of all places. What was taking place over there was just absolute bizarre. These people were hallucinating negativity all over the place. Couldn't describe anyone as anything positive, and would only cheer up when something like deviant or criminal or deceptive was taking place. Like for instance, if say Alice's mom would get so angry that Alice would get scared, and she would lie to her, she calls her mom, but I'm not so sure about that. But foster parents, whatever, beaten like a red-haired stepchild, because, stepchildren get that, because you can tell the difference between maternal. Now, the problem with my mom Rose, was that she said that every single parent has threatened their child's life at some point. I'm like, no, they usually say, I love you. Only parents who are not the kid's parents, they would threaten their child's life and then turn around and tell the police and everyone that, I had threatened her life, when she's the one who had said that she brought me into this world and she could take me out, which that indeed is a death threat if I ever did hear it. But never once did I ever say that I was going to kill her. Now, thing is, though, I heard that she had some type of a recording of it where she recorded. The thing is, though, like, if I were to hear it, and I recognized whose voice that actually was on that tape, because if she got her new husband, I got enough ESP telepathy to be able to read a person when they are sending those type of signals of hate or discrimination. Like, we all feel that, okay? Like, especially if, say, you're a minority and you feel someone giving you that type of look. Like, a lot of times, twice bitten, once shy. The fact of having a lot of hate and racial discrimination towards you leaves you feeling that way in most situations as trauma. And this is the psychology that I'm going to be teaching, is how we fix our associative thinking patterns. Because after all, certain things bring you nostalgia, and you reminisce warm, fuzzy thoughts about Christmas and snow, don't you? Like, you immediately think candy canes and stockings by the fireplace, and just there's a warm comfort of Disney playing on a television that no one really is paying attention to, because everyone's talking. And everyone has way more interesting stories than anything on television, a lot more detailed than, because what people have to say from their own experience and what they know how to handle things is the basis of why we have movies and all that type of stuff. So why would we pay attention to what's on the TV when our friends and family are together and having a moment? Because we could always see that rerun again. We can pop the DVD in and play it one more time. It's not a big deal, right? But in the moment that we have together, while we are still so who knows? We could be looking at some giant war that's about to erupt, where everyone literally gets exterminated from this planet. We don't know if literal aliens have finally come to this planet and are witnessing us acting like this. Because when they see someone like me and Alice being attacked in such a horrible way, and I'm able to call everything that's taking place, because they thought that we were so vulnerable that would never be able to describe exactly what was taking place. And, well, they did make a valiant attempt, I must say, especially with those heat lasers and stuff like that, that you got to turn off all the lights before you start seeing little time flashes. Oh, there it is, and get that on tape. After all, that's in the procurements. But, directed energy weapons, essentially, is why looking at the war with Ukraine, very strangely, because those are all projectiles, and, that's so outdated that I'm surprised this show is even going on. But anyway, that's where, we're talking about people being vaporized from satellites that have nuclear beam technology. Like, it's literally something to be aware of, because the matter that I'm addressing, especially such deviant atrocities connived with such malicious intent, as the highest recorded death statistics of 1,000% higher than average, meant 10 times more than any other apartment building standing untouched by war or natural disaster. Awards handed out for highest mortality rate goes to BC Housing Management, the terrorist organization who organized the Grim Reapers of grandparents by the every week book solid doing bedbugs stay out of the apartment for 24 hours after their poison blast killing the Uberman surface dwellers, as that activity is in use from below in the maintenance crawl space as a reminder of the catacomb terrorists of the 1930s and 1940s who used to blast blowtorches up on the inside of the catacombs, cooking the bombs of the feet of the people who walked on the sidewalks, and then injuring them. So they had to go and see a medic, and the medics kept on making money, and they were enslaving all of Europe. And this is what really was taking place for the Nuremberg trial to occur. So take into consideration that the cult called the Untermensch, that had meant the subdweller. In other words, the maintenance crawl space and the maintenance tunnels, just going over it one more time because you had to hear it like a deja vu. Now, when Atlas is, basically the instruments in this case. Their Atlas pest control permeated poison that's leaching into neighboring suites above and below, wall to wall, side to side, full Dolby surround death as Munchausen by proxy. Vancouver coastal health care workers hoping that Atlas pest control injures the tenants, so they need medical treatment as slaves or human trafficked because they were looking for the vulnerable, and by job seeking the position at and getting a job at a Chinese retirement home building in the poorest part of the city where they were craving the vulnerable and thought that 705 Jackson Avenue, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada was going to be an absolute smorgasbord of vulnerable for them to pucker their delight and indulge their perversions of abuse so sinisterly that it's called Zitzen. Robbing the poor and making them blind with cheap Walmart heat lasers aimed by watching the tenants in their homes, naked at times, or going poo on the toilet, peeping through the camera on the tenant's cell phone screen, sharing all of their online information regarding Visa, MasterCard, banking, taxes, social security numbers with unusually large stack on top of stack after stack of Hikvision, DVR, 24 camera operating, remote access in close proximity, camera duality, digital video recording device, DVR, espionage operation of sabotage and contrary espionage, device tampering, cell phone camera spying like Huawei cell phones in China, the Chinese spy phones, pure international espionage, voyeuristic, peeping tomfoolery, eavesdropping spyware that they're using. And they're doing this habitually because they are trying to get away with robbing us and by not allowing Alice to come home when she had no delete date found on her on her information. She's still registered and still findable, and it says no move reason either, meaning that things haven't actually been filed. Now, when taking a look at this damage report, that the date was left open and I got threatened, forced to sign, meant that technically that paper is completely void, but still we have a paper trail of threatening letters that succeeded it. And the problem that I'm seeing is if that was so sick, I would never be able to find a place to rent anywhere for the rest of my life. And the thing is, though, too, that was a damage report. So, yeah, were they expecting on as soon as I go out, or were they planning on putting me in involuntary or something so they could do this again by their constant gaslighting, which I was making documentation because I'm not delirious and I don't do drugs. I'll do vitamins, which the vitamins actually help with health and alertness and intelligence. And this is why I love drinking orange juice. Orange juice is basically why I drink my preferred drink. I don't like drinking beer, honestly. Neither does Alice. So yeah, we are a perfect couple. And it hurts me that they would do this because in March we were informed that if she got out of the hospital, if she, what do you mean if she? Are you planning on killing her in there? I know the clozapine was banned in Europe in 1970 because of killing patients from granulocytosis, which is a compromised immune system. So the thing is, though, because when doing a drug test, like a piss test or even a blood test, there is not going to be any trace element of the drug that you had taken because it metabolizes. And as it metabolizes, when you excrete it in urine, it's called urea. There is no cocaine in drug test P because it metabolizes. There's no way that it can show up as a substance that it originally was. So all of those are lies. I went and asked Life Labs previously if I could get a drug test by them to prove that I was clean and sober and this and that, and they informed me that because of the metabolism, that they're not checking for drugs at all when they do blood at Life Labs. What they're actually checking for with blood work when you are on mental health drugs like antipsychotic or an antidepressant, which is an anticholinergic, no different than an opiate or an opioid. The opioids, those things that stop vitamin uptake, is absolute murder because they're checking for granulocytosis, neutropenia, lymphopenia. I'm serious. They are fully aware of the compromised immune system that's taking place. They can't hide behind not knowing because they have devised their entire enslavement camp, their entire slave trade union that's taking place here in Canada. That must be stopped because the Life Labs are checking for neutropenia, meaning that they are fully aware. They're fully aware of this. And that means that this is a premeditated murder that's taking place, and total enslavement because people are enslaved to die. And the Nuremberg Codex, for one thing, was put in place, and that entire war was about that because when you look at a poppy, you have to remember that opiates are anticholinergic. And that means that, they cause the cancer, is what I'm saying. And because the anticholinergic poppy, the opiate, it's a proof flower, it stops vitamin uptake, it causes scurvy, it causes anemia. And essentially, when you look at a poppy and you think about how many people died in that war, and then you think of how many people have died because of a poppy, then you know that there are things far worse than war in this world when you look at a poppy because of the anticholinergics. And this relates to the medical professionals. And they already know this because the Life Labs are checking for neutropenia, like granulocytosis, HIV, AIDS, basically, a compromised immune system, anemia, like the loss of blood, because that's exactly what it does. And that also relates to people having ADHD and people having schizophrenia. It's all caused by vitamin deficiency because of the prevention of the uptake. So this is why I don't want her to die. I love her, and I'm going to do anything in my power to be able to pull her out of this because of the lies that we're told by the BC housing staff who are robbing us and don't want her to come back because if I go out, she's still here, means that they can't come in and steal things. And that's exactly why they don't work here. It's because I'm still losing stuff. Like I lost $20 the other day. I left it on the counter, and then I go and get it, and it's gone. Like there's $30 there, and like money goes missing if I have it on me. Like they literally, like as soon as I go to sleep, even like they go for my bag or something. Like and that's just the thing. They had done something to the actual door lock thing where it was basically coming right out. It was like loose. Like, and I remember hearing someone tell me that. You gotta get smokes off him. Had someone, ask him for smokes, and he said, "Well, go up to 602. God's not there. Like, just shake the door handle. Like it's not easy to get in here. Seriously. Now the thing is, what I get informed, it does open my mind to things because it makes me very much aware of what I'm dealing with. Because essentially, when we're talking about the Chinese retirement home building in the poorest part of the city where they're craving the vaudeville and thought that 75 Jackson Avenue, Vancouver, British Columbia was going to be an absolute smorgasbord of vaudeville for them to pucker there, indulging their perversions of abuse. So essentially, it's called Zertzung, robbing the poor and making them blind with cheap Walmart lasers aimed by watching tenants' homes naked at times, going poo on the toilet, peeping through the camera on the tenant's cell phone screen, sharing all of their online information regarding Visa, MasterCard, banking, tax, and social security numbers with an unusually large stack on top of stack after stack of Hikvision, DVR, 24 camera, remote access in close proximity, camera duality, digital video recorders, DVR, not DVD. Okay, not DVD. No, this stuff is it's constantly taking up feed. But we only have probably about maybe 8 or 10 security cameras in BCOs, and these DVRs, the Hikvisions, they support 24 each one, and they have stacks of these things. Okay, meaning that everyone's cell phone. That's what it's really for. It's to cover like within the units, because one of the tenants had suggested that they believe that there was a camera in the fire alarm, which again is a possibility, but it's still speculation until I actually pull something out that has wires and I can stomp on it. Okay, but as I go for photographs of the Hikvision, well, yeah, I Google Lens it and researched because it was suspicious, and these activities were taking place. So the spyware issue. When we're talking about our privacy being invaded, where there is freedom of information, you just have to request it. And Section 22 will put any restrictions that would otherwise be harmful. However, when requesting information and everything gets on Section 22, it seems like that information, if it's so harmful that no one can see it, even with freedom of information, that's what exactly does it prelude to? Because if it reveals the guilty, as it were, because of forgery of signatures, forgery of dates, all these forgeries have taken place by BCOs in a scam attempt of, like writing the date later, change the date, change it to October instead of September, or whatever it is, because I've seen dates on there that said that September 15th we're supposed to have moved in, but we didn't move in until November 2nd. And this is a question, because then were they receiving payment for those 2 months actually of payment that we didn't stay there yet, but apparently it was in our name. Now the thing is though, since November I have been having more money taken out of my account than what was supposed to be by $47 overcharge. As well, had gotten an increase of rent notice pertaining to a 38.1% increase of $125, which I know that 3.5 is the highest that you can raise the rent in a 1 year term. Next year, however, it's not going to be 3.5, it's going to be 3%. They're lowering it, so it'll be even less. So if they're to increase the rent every single year, they're 3.5 or 3%, to reach 38.1%, it would take, just wild guess numbers for how long that would take, like say 3 every 10 years would be that, we're talking like almost a decade worth of rent increase before it would ever reach 38.1% increase. I mean, where do they think they could pull this shit? Pardon language, but where do they think they could pull this off? Like, they would really have to be delirious. Like, are they drinking on a job? Like, are they that criminal that they think that they could scam everything? Like, exactly what is taking place in their mind? Why are they given any pay at all to be able to do this to people? Like, they're being paid, like, how much money? Like, way too much money, because the money's gone to their heads, and it's basically money for nothing. And they are just mad greedy. Or I don't know what type of drugs they're doing, but they don't know how to synthesize their own cocaine using an enzyme and caffeine to be able to break it down for a sugar from the carbohydrate. Then, okay, they're paying how much, like $100 a gram for that crap, and probably gobbling it up like a goat. Like, and the thing is, they don't even have the intelligence to make it themselves, because anyone could break it bad. Like, go and get yourself some Sudafed if you really want to get some iodine, red phosphorus, and some acetone. Shabam, there you go. It's called the Rosenmud method. Now, the Birch reduction uses aluminium or even palladium as a metallic reactor, but I'm not going to get into details of every method, because there are many different ways to synthesize chemicals chemicals. And if you are smart enough to know how to do that, and you know medical science as well as I do, this is why education is got to be what is actually needed. Whereas we abolish the medical system altogether for being greedy and enslaving people, and then teach people the medical science properly and be able to correct it. Because yes, we can go through all of that because we know that vitamin B3 actually prevents cancer, and it's a lack of which causes it, because the compromised immune system, after all, is how cancer is actually created. And vitamin B3 happens to be nicotine. So those no smoking signs, yeah, they're just a hate crime, an anti-freedom sign. And because they're inconsistent with provisions, because they are counterintelligence, they're a fraud scam. And this is proven because nicotine is vitamin B3. Vitamin B3, it prevents cancer, the lack of which is vitamin deficiency, which compromises the immune system, and that is what causes cancer. It causes neoplasm to overtake, whereas you don't have an immune system to be able to combat that neoplasm. So essentially, yeah, the hallmarks of cancer was a sales pitch on how to grow a pet neoplasm in your slave.